Hey y'all! You like Fire Emblem? Well, I assume you do because you clicked on the video, and that's what most people come here for. And people ask me from time to time, hey Bopper, what's your favorite Fire Emblem? What's your least favorite? What's the most overrated? What's the most underrated Fire Emblem? And, I could answer those questions. I could make my definitive list of all 22 Fire Emblem games ranked from worst to best, but everyone's kinda done that. And that's easy. So I decided to do something much worse. I asked the internet. Before you cringe at the idea of asking people on the internet for help, here's what I did. I sent out a survey, including every single Fire Emblem game, and asked people to rate them from 1 to 10. And here are the results. Let's check out the board. Look at this. Along that y-axis, we have got 1 to 10, and on that x-axis, we have every game from 22 to 1, but they're not labeled, so you gotta watch the video to find out. Now, the thing is that 22 games is a lot to talk about, so for this video, I enlisted the help of many creators across the Fire Emblem community to help me sort these out, talk about them, and react to the ratings. So, without further ado, let's jump right in to number 22.
Hello everyone, I'm Vivian Aladrin, YouTube Pico celebrity, and I'm honored to talk about the lowest rated Fire Emblem game in Professor Bopper's fan poll. Truly, we all got here together, and I knew we could do it. So, Fire Emblem Fates: Revelations was the secret DLC third path in a game that already did the Pokemon model by kind of making you buy both versions to get the full experience, only to then release a new DLC chapter titled Thusly, which is a shame, because Fire Emblem Fates' secret blood incest was right there, but whatever. So, I like Fates. I genuinely do, and this isn't to say that it's, good in some profound objective standard. I'm no mega genius like Mahler or Dishonored Good Boy or whatever, but the games, all of them, can be very fun. The mechanics can be interesting to play with, and there's a lot to like on a surface level with them, so why is Revelations the literal worst Fire Emblem in this poll? Well, outside of the secret blood incest, Revelations is kind of uniquely bad in comparison to Conquest and Birthright, and also has the burden of having all of Conquest and Birthright's, worst supplemental offenses. Niles, Rajat, Soleil being cured of lesbianism, child marriages, everything grotesquely uncomfortable in the base 2 games gets to be here for the other big reason why folks hate this game. See, Revelations is the golden path through the game story, unless you're Azana or Scarlet, where the two warring kingdoms come together and jump off a cliff to fight a big dragon that's behind it the whole time. Instead of having your heart broken because sweet baby bean Elise or prickly pineapple boy Takumi get themselves very much killed, you get to pick the path where everyone is friends at the end, and we only go after the big, scary, comically evil bad guys, and, the parents he possesses in order to make you kill them again. Anyway, the golden paths in games like these can really undermine the emotional tension of pitting yourself against people you don't want to fight, and it kind of hamstrings the entire appeal of Fates in a very visceral way. So outside of it being a fun excuse to, cross-kingdom shipping or whatever, what exactly, if anything, is good about Revelations? Well, not a lot, but I have a couple things I like. I don't think it's a genius title by any means, but a lot of what I like about it has its roots in what makes Fates so appealing to me in the first place, and that's how good the writing is early on. I'm not talking about the awkward attempts the English translation team made to ensure you that Elise is an adult, please just trust us, but I am talking about how the first few chapters get you caught up on all the relevant players, so that when you have to make the choice in chapter 6, you get the struggle. Does Corrin go with the family they were supposed to be raised with, or the family that actually did raise them? And Revelations makes something of an incredibly emotionally honest choice in that Corrin can't do either. They feel too close to the family they're just getting to know, and can't abandon the family they've loved all their life, and instead of, ending war, both sides turn on Corrin, and Azura drags him off to the secret kingdom of Vala to escape. So the game starts with just you, Azura, and your butler or maid depending, up against literally everyone else. Fantastic. In a way, what frustrates me about Revelations is that the initial setup is so fucking compelling. I'm on board immediately, and outside of the more tedious gimmicks all over them, the early chapters stick to that relatively tight ship of a small group of people trying to stop this war independently, and I just wish the game was more of that. Honestly, it's a fantastic premise for a Golden Path, one that feels like genuine hardship all the way through as you take on this massive, monumental effort that it stings, particularly for me, that they just wrote in eventually that Ryoma and Xander just blindly trust you and jump off a cliff to attack and dethrone Dragon God. I still like the first bit, though, and I can enjoy the fun little crossovers. I just always feel like it could have been a better story. Oh well.
If there is a holy grail in the Fire Emblem series, it might just be Arcanaya Saga, also known as BS Fire Emblem. Released for the Satellaview in 1997, Arcanaya Saga is a partially lost prequel to Mystery of the Emblem Book 1 that shows the fall of Arcanaya and the initial effects that it had on Macedon, Grust, Arulis, and on down the list of important places in Mystery of the Emblem. The most tantalizing part of Arcanaya Saga is that it survives in any form at all. As with most games on the Satellaview, Arcanaya Saga is a technical marvel more than anything else. The Satellaview was a Japanese-only peripheral for the Super Famicom that allowed players to download and play games that were broadcast live to their consoles. Everything from streaming to Stadia to modern DLC traces part of its roots back to the Satellaview. Because of the unique technical challenges inherent to mid-90s online console gaming, Satellaview games are often distinct experiences from their standard cartridge-based counterparts. From a Fire Emblem-centric perspective, Arcanaya Saga is the precedent for DLC like Rise of the Deliverance and Cindered Shadows, as well as being the first Fire Emblem game to use non-siege objectives and to feature voice acting. Yes, voice acting! This is what I was referring to when I said that the game is partially lost. It is a miracle that all 4 episodes of Arcanaya Saga's gameplay survive, but the presentation is perhaps gone forever. As the game streamed into Super Famicoms, there was voice acting that told the story. This made it easier for the game to be timed around the limited broadcast windows, and while recordings of the voice acting survive, it isn't possible to play the game as it was originally broadcast. Despite that, the gameplay of Arcanaya Saga offers a lot of innovations and dead ends that make the game a frankly wild experience. Satellaview games were broadcast in limited windows, and so every chapter was broadcast on a timer. The objective was to rack up as many points as possible by killing enemies, looting chests, and visiting villages. It's Crazy Taxi, McKellen edition. As a one-off game and a technical marvel, Arcanaya Saga is fascinating, but in that arm's length way that many proof-of-concept games are. It's an achievement, one to be appreciated, but man, it is sometimes a bummer to actually play, with Episode 3 being a particular drag. Of course, playing a relic like Arcanaya Saga is only part of the appeal. Anyone curious to see the games in their original broadcast form should check out the videos uploaded by Cabooses' Retro Obscurities, linked in the description below. If you really crave the story, the maps were remade as bonus features for a new Mystery of the Emblem, which is cool. However, the original experience is one of a kind and sadly lost to time. The Famicom Fire Emblem games really didn't fare well in this ranking, with Gaiden getting the short end of an already short stick. It makes sense why the Famicom Emblem games would do so poorly. This old hardware is not kind to turn-based, menu-based games, but man, I kind of became something of a Gaiden stan while collecting footage for this video. There are good reasons for why Gaiden rates as low as it does, but it's a game that does some clever things that it deserves credit for. When we get to Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, we'll see that the biggest struggle of these old Fire Emblem games is their item management. Gaiden eliminates this problem by giving each character a generic zero-might weapon and giving everyone only one equipment slot that can be fitted with armor or a more powerful weapon. All weapons are infinitely durable, and there's no consumables like vulneraries and pure waters to be passed around. The removal of inventory management and weapon levels is a simplification that makes Gaiden play like butter compared to its predecessor. The player never needs to consult the game manual for might calculations, and since shopping lines and the slog of passing items around are a thing of the past, Gaiden is a game that's almost always got the player in the action. Gaiden is the second Fire Emblem game, and it belongs to the tradition of games like Adventures of Link, Simon's Quest, and Doki Doki Mario Club. Gaiden is the first Fire Emblem game to include an overworld and remains, along with its remake, the only game to feature explorable towns and dungeons. This gives the game a grander scope and more adventurous feel. It's fun looting treasure and fighting monsters, and the overworld gives the land of Valencia a stronger sense of place than the Arcanaya of FE1. Of course, Gaiden has its issues. Major issues. It does not land this low on the list for nothing. For me, the biggest problem with Gaiden is the combination of big, meaty enemies and incredibly low hit rates. Look at my early game units smash against these zombies. Everything takes so many shots to kill, and the hit rates are often unreliable because of the ridiculous terrain bonuses in the game. Sometimes this shit just takes forever. And while I don't necessarily dislike the weirdly large maps, mostly because of how inconvenient rearranging deployment positions is, the fact that I always feel the need to rush getting Warp on Silk is not a good sign for how many of these maps play. Despite the fact that Gaiden understands its hardware limitations better than FE1 does, it can be brutally slow. Without many meaningful ways to improve hit rates, like the supports and combat arts of Gaiden's remake, progress can often stall. It unfortunately makes Gaiden feel more like a curiosity, and fan translations that have lines such as "the land is living in contradiction" and "General Tozen has gone coup d'etat with his plan" don't help. Gaiden is a good game, frozen in the amber of its time. Its remake, by the way, won't appear on this list for a long time. Hey look! It's the other Famicom game I kept vaguely alluding to. I'm not surprised that Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, the first Fire Emblem game, has placed as low as it has. Unlike the more divisive Fire Emblem heroes, the deck has been stacked against Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light by time. Functionally, this is the Fire Emblem experience that would later be standardized in Mystery of the Emblem and Thracia 776, but it does not come close to playing with the smoothness of those later games. Famicom and NES games don't age poorly by virtue. Faxanadu, Punch-Out, Crystalis, Adventures of Lolo, and Kirby's Adventure are all examples of games that have aged brilliantly from that era. The difference between those games and Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light is that those are action games and platformers, while Fire Emblem is a turn-based, menu-based tactics game. It's a genre that just had a rough time on the Famicom. For many players, the slow clunk will be too much. I referenced the item management in the Gaiden review, and it bears repeating. Even if you're proactive in your item management, a ton of time still gets eaten up with shopping and moving items around, especially items looted from chests. This is largely because there is no item management in the preps menu before each map, and trading is completely one way. Items can be given from one character to another, but nothing can be swapped and taken. It can make the game brutal to play, and makes me yearn for even the sloppier convoy systems in games like Thracia and Awakening. However, this isn't to say that the game has nothing going for it. Aesthetically, this is one of the coolest Fire Emblem games. The music, sprites, animations, text, and sound effects are all classic Famicom. Anyone who loves high-quality, old-school aesthetics will love this game. It bleeds classic. The music and graphics go a long way to carry this game through its slogging menus. One area, though, where the game is often criticized is the map size, and I disagree. The game has no way to rearrange deployment, and the large maps allow you to better prepare your army. This is a staple of Kaga Emblem, and it prevents the game from being frustrating in the same way a game like Thracia 776 is. With few exceptions, the map design prevents sucker punches, which is especially appreciated since the UI is such a drag. But, like I said before, the UI brings down the experience. Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light is a well-designed game with a well-told story. Its fatal flaw is that Father Time waits for no one, least of all Famicom games.
Hi, I'm KSFK. When Bopper asked me to provide my thoughts on Fire Emblem Heroes for his video, I was honestly expecting for Heroes to sit comfortably in the middle of the list rather than at 18th place, which is just about bookending the bottom 5 of the list. It's a controversial yet undeniably popular take on the Fire Emblem franchise, which sits in the top 50 highest grossing mobile games of all time, making more revenue than most games of its kind, and even the mobile ports of Minecraft, yet despite this, it was voted to be considerably worse than most other mainline entries in the series. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not the kind of person to place the worth of a product on how much money it makes. I simply brought it up because it portrays an interesting dichotomy between the fan opinion of the game and how willing they are to spend on it, which is more of a problem with the gacha monetization system than anything, and with the unique spin that Fire Emblem Heroes has on said model. See, for those uninitiated, gacha is a progression model used in various games where one can spend an in-game currency, in Heroes' case orbs, to unlock characters, skins or buffs, similar to loot boxes, or, as a more innocuous and frankly naive example, a pack of trading cards. Of all the games to use this model I've played, I have never seen one that leans on it quite as much as Fire Emblem Heroes does. Before I open that can of worms though, I should probably give my thoughts on the general gameplay as a whole. Fire Emblem Heroes, as expected of a mobile game, does not feature the super in-depth tactical gameplay of Fire Emblem that you may be used to. Rather, a streamlined take on the gameplay with more emphasis on simple stat comparisons and doing away with such pedestrian things as hit rates and crit rates. This is the 0RN you were all warned about. Additionally, many stats are done away with, notably magic, skill and luck, though I feel like luck isn't entirely removed from the equation for some reason. I think this is a pretty decent transition of core Fire Emblem gameplay into a game that is not only designed to be more bite-sized, but more accessible too, making Heroes a pretty solid starting place for would-be Fire Emblem gamers who may want to give the series a provisional endeavour, a college try, a try before you buy period, etc. For players who want to apply somewhat more in-depth strategies to the game, Heroes also works around a flexible, equipable skill system, kind of sort of similar to the one seen in Fire Emblem Fates, where units can equip most skills that pertain to their class type, with very minor exceptions. However, this may be both the game's biggest boon and its biggest bane, as in order to gain the ability to equip most of these skills that don't come with your unit, you need to quote-unquote inherit a skill from another unit, which not only involves having another unit with the skill, but also being willing to remove them from your army completely. This is where Fire Emblem Heroes' aforementioned unique gacha model comes into play. Many games in the gacha genre will extensively promote the gacha features, but to many players it's not a huge requirement as long as you have the character you like. However, continued summoning is, in almost all cases, a requirement for unit customization in Heroes even if you have your favourite character. This means that the gacha in FE Heroes is not a feature of the game, but rather its central mechanic, which can make it a particularly taxing experience at its worst, and it makes the climb to endgame content significantly more slog-like. Is that a word? It's a word now, I've decided, cry about it. While it might seem like I'm picking at hairs by comparing Fire Emblem Heroes' skill inheritance model to the monetization of its corporate coin-grabbing contemporaries, interlinking the gacha experience with the actual gameplay and progression can create a severely volatile game feel where the player's enjoyment of a game is dictated by whether or not they summon units that they want but might not even intend to keep or even use in the core gameplay. Made even worse so by the fact that half of the units released per month are limited time. You might want a copy of limited time character Summer Wolt, but instead end up with Hilda. It doesn't help that avid fans of certain characters will find that they might want to max their units out, a feat which requires 11 copies of a single character, which even by gacha standards is a teensy weensy bit redonkulous. I could go on about the gacha system all day, but I have other things to cover, so to save your time, here's a lightning round of my thoughts on the other aspects of this game. The single player content has a lot to it, and while it's cool to have all that, the story suffers from a clear lack of vision, which jumps between wanting to do Monster of the Week one year to questionably outlined epics the next, and at times features completely unlikable characters. There's also the PvP. Since PvP quality intrinsically depends on the game balance being good, which Phase isn't, it's not very fun. The game shines with its large roster, which is honestly disproportionately large, but since the game has content built around using characters from specific entries and teams together, you are given a lot of opportunities to make use of a large roster if you happen to have one. All in all, Fire Emblem Heroes is, honestly, entirely fine, surprisingly, and not a whole lot else. At worst, it's a necessary evil for the franchise, and while I feel that Fire Emblem Heroes is a game that big Fire Emblem fans should at least try out, I can completely understand why they wouldn't want to, be it because of the awful game balance, unengaging story, or the aforementioned gacha and accompanying volatile game feel. Said volatile game feel can also be tied back to my opening statement, wherein I said that the game has a strong split between fan opinion and fan support. Or, maybe I'm just being too philosophical about a phone game that's being killed slowly and insidiously by power creep anyway. You be the judge.
Coming in at number 17, it's Fire Emblem Fate's Birthright. Okay, let's see if we can make this. So Birthright is in a bit of a weird position in the Fates trio. I almost called it a trilogy, but they all came out at once. I don't really think that... I don't know if release order matters in trilogies. They also all happen, like, separately from whatever. In that it rests in the same comfortable position Fates has across the board. Everyone hates Corrin, hates the writing, hates the baby realms, and is forever weirded up by the amount of weird incest, half-incest, and child marriages. That's a universal constant in all three. Birthright particularly struggles because it's both not as mechanically interesting as Conquest and also not as scathingly bad and gimmicky as Revelations. So it gets to kind of quietly sit around in the unofficial middle sister of the triplets, the Masha to Conquest's juicy MILF Olga and Revelations' starry-eyed Arena. No one knows what I'm talking about. Okay, that's fine. Look, I genuinely like the Fates games. I don't like everything about them. I hate that the only lesbian romance you can have is between you and a yandere stalker that's both a rehash of an Awakening character and was birthed from a marriage to Hayato Fire Emblem age 18, please believe me. I hate that the game lets you marry the Hoshiden royal family, you know, the family that's your birthright. That there's just, like... There's so much about these games that really, truly is frustrating. So many changes the translation team had to go back to and try and patch up so that the games don't cause, like, a straight-up moral panic overseas. But I'm actually not here to talk shit on Birthright. Nor am I going to give it, like, a lesser of two evils sort of moral argument between it and Conquest. What am I going to talk about? Okay, so having spent way too much time and money on these games, please don't tell my mom, I've noticed a fun little detail in that Conquest and Revelations both make a point to, like, that your character commits as little murder as possible. Like, you presumably knock around the Hoshiden army without killing them, for reasons I'll get to in Conquest. Yes, you're not done hearing my awful voice just yet, I'm sorry, but Birthright doesn't make that clear at all. In fact, you kind of murder quite a lot of folks in Birthright. Like, not just Nori and Scum, but even the Wind Tribe folks that were enchanted to look like zombies. Like, there's something initially very righteous in Birthright, right? Like, you're fighting evil McBad Guy, Garen, Fire Emblem, Yago and Hans are, like, fucked up monsters. You know, you're out here sliving, but as you keep going, at least for me, there's, like, an edge of vindictiveness to it. Like, you don't go out of your way to kill Leo and Camilla, sure, but you kill a lot, and it makes sense, right? Like, Nor's shown no mercy to Hoshido since the beginning. You don't really fight that without retaliation in kind, and I actually really like that. Like, it's a detail that really only shines after playing all the paths and reading them carefully, and I can't say I recommend that option, but Birthright gets bloody in ways that it almost doesn't want you to really think about, particularly in contrast to Conquest's hyper-focus on the violence you commit. The actual heart of it, while I don't think it's the most interesting Fates iteration, can be a fun little look at how much damage righteousness can play a hand in, and while death abounds in all paths, I don't know, there's something to be said in how quickly Corrin adheres to fatal action in this game about stopping a tyrant.
Fire Emblem Warriors is the only Dynasty Warriors game I've ever played. That's a clear, nice-ass disclaimer up front. I don't know what I'm talking about. That will be sweet vindication for some people, and Warriors ranking in with a 5.5 out of 10 is sweet vindication that this game is perfectly fine. Fire Emblem is a series largely associated with handhelds, and for good reason. Since the move to the GBA, the series only has 2 entries on non-portable consoles. Warriors is the one game that really leans into portable existence by being the only game that truly embraces a pick-up-and-play attitude. It's easy to play 1 or 2 maps of Warriors, put the game away, and then easily come back later. Mechanically, the game is simple in its moment-to-moment action. The only serious complexities come from managing your AI allies in order to clear the maps. Even so, these more complex features of armies and pair-up and etc. fall away as the focus circles in on mashing hundreds of dudes with Fire Emblem characters. I played through the game on normal and hard, with some teasing around on lunatic, and I never felt pushed to get better, and honestly, I don't mind. The game is about the aesthetic pleasure of destroying armies, and the simplicity of the gameplay only furthers its fun as a pick-up-and-play experience. I picked up the game again after a year and a half for this video and was surprised at how smooth the transition back into the game was. The game just also has an incomprehensible volume of stuff to do. There is a story mode, which tells a bad story that exists just to give you the Lissa axe punching you want. There's also a history mode where scenarios from the main series are transported over. If you want to beat everything from the story mode, the unlocked difficulties, beat the history maps, get all the collectibles, you will easily have 150 plus hours of stuff to do. It's one of the rare times where Fire Emblem DLC has not felt like a complete ripoff, so, there's that. None of this is transcendent in any way, but the game gets the job done, and perhaps the best compliment to be given to it is that it's exactly what you think it is, and it's good at that. Of course, there are problems. The burning, itchy, nasty, pus-filled sore on this game is its inventory management. For a game that really pushes a pick-up-and-play attitude, there are a lot of weapons, items, and things you have to sort through. For the upgrade items, it doesn't matter because they get listed and consumed when you're powering up your characters. For the equipable weapons, you need to sort through dozens of useless weapons to find the different versions of Silver Axe and Horse Slayer and Zanbato that you actually want and trash the rest. It's a shocking waste of time in a game that already has a grinding problem. Other than simply beating the game on its standard difficulties, everything from levels, weapon skills, upgrade items, unlockable characters, and so on down the list need to be grinded out. For some players, this will be a great boon, while many others just won't have the patience. And that is my final recommendation. Play through the story mode, have a blast, and for everything beyond that, your mileage may vary. Before we started collecting poll data and dividing up this video, I began writing the Tokyo Mirage Session Sharp FE section. I knew this would be my cross to bear, and so it shall be. I was not surprised to see this game placed so low, but I was surprised to see the score distribution. This game's rating got absolutely pummeled with 1s. If I normalize the amount of 1 ratings to become a more expected bell curve, or at least closer to expected, the score of the game becomes 6.4, which is, I think, more in line with the actual quality of the game. I can't just throw data out, no matter how much I don't believe the data. Besides, the volume of sheer hatred for this game is an expected response given how much a troll this game is. Tokyo Mirage Session Sharp FE is a crossover between Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei, a combination that gave people a very specific set of expectations. Such a mashup suggested a tactics game with the brooding style of Shin Megami Tensei. Of course, that game already exists in Shin Megami Tensei Devil Survivor, so developer Atlas turned the crossover into an anime pop idol JRPG, alienating to ravenous fan bases in one game by deliberately ignoring the aesthetics and settings of both series is the type of boldness I can respect. However, saying that the game is intentionally ignoring the two franchises makes Tokyo Mirage Session seem cynical, and I don't want to give that impression. This game is relentlessly positive, colorful, and cheerful in a way no other Fire Emblem game is. Placed in the shoes of Itsuki Fire Emblem, we lead a Scooby-Doo gang into a mysterious realm where pop idols and innocent bystanders are sucked up and corrupted. It's in this mystery realm known as the Idolosphere where most of the action happens. Gameplay-wise, the combat loop is addictive. Using the weapons of Fire Emblem, swords, axes, bows, magic, and so on, the combat is all about swapping around your party members, attacking enemy weaknesses, and building chain combo attacks that allow you to attack multiple times in a single action. It's fun, fast, and is constantly giving your brain those ever-important dopamine hits. The problem with this game is the classic 50-plus hour RPG problem of having fun gameplay that just can't sustain itself for such a gargantuan runtime. In conjunction with the story, which is decidedly fine, but not much more, the game can feel lurching as it approaches the mid and late game. When the story of RPGs is written, Tokyo Mirage Session Sharp FE will be a footnote to a footnote, a small, indistinguishable sound in a grand symphony. Does that make it bad? Nah. It being a game without illusions of grandeur make it charming in a way that the brooding Shin Megami Tensei series and other contemporaneous RPGs just aren't.
Hi, I'm Zetetic. Today I'm going to do something that probably nobody has done today. Briefly talk about Mystery of the Emblem, also known as FE3. In a poll conducted by the Pewfessor Research Center, FE3 received an average score of 6.21. This is kind of surprising. I would have expected something worse. Not because the game is bad, but because it's kind of lacking. But a middling score sounds about right. When most people think of FE3, they think of Book 2, so let's talk about Book 1. Its primary purpose is to catch people up on the story, and it does well enough at that job. Yes, there are some cut chapters, some missing characters, and so on, but they're not important to the plot of Book 2. If Riss didn't want to get turned into a vulnerary, he should have hired a better talent agent. It's really that simple. There isn't much public commentary on why Book 1 is designed the way it is. There was this Famicom interview in 1994 with Shozo Kaga and the creator of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi. It turns out they both liked each other's games, and Sakaguchi talked about how Fire Emblem was such a big influence on Final Fantasy's developers at Square, even though it's a difficult game. Then the interviewer says, and I quote, "The Super Famicom re-release of Fire Emblem has a lot of changes. Some of the strategies don't work anymore either. Bantu can't tank like he could before." And that's it. Shozo Kaga's wisdom is summarized as, "No 127 defense Bantu anymore, lol." Kaga himself doesn't even directly address the comments, probably out of embarrassment. That's why I'm led to believe that Book 1 has two main purposes: to be a story recap and to teach new players to the series how to play Book 2. If you look at Book 1 through the lens of a remake, it mostly looks like FE3's new features were meant for Book 2, but just tacked onto Book 1. Things like dismounting and the bond support system feel more in place in Book 2, where those features are more useful for ensuring your characters don't die to early game effective weaponry, like the Rioter's Bane in Chapter 2. In Book 1, they feel kind of extraneous, not a hindrance to the gameplay, but not addressing any particular challenge either, mostly because Book 1 is pretty easy by comparison. While Book 2 is decently fun to play through, that's pretty much all it's got going for it. Not that that's a bad thing, but Fire Emblem's Arcanaya story is as basic as it gets in the series. FE3's remake, FE12, features extraneous story elements like the orphan assassins and the avatar who puts random garbage they find on the floor onto their head. In FE3, there is barely any side story at all, and it's an interesting look back at how Fire Emblem games used to tell stories. While I think the series has greatly improved since FE3's release, the historical significance of FE3 isn't lost on me. The SNES enabled some of the quality of life changes that FE3 introduced, like being able to see movement ranges. And the game's UI clearly improved from FE2. But to someone whose first game was FE7, or Awakening, or Three Houses, FE3 is just a curiosity. A middling game in the series that helps keep the series going, but isn't anything to write home about in and of itself. And there's nothing wrong with that at all, it just means that FE3 is important not as a game, but as a bridge that the series had to cross at some point in order to exist in the way it does today. And that's just fine.
Red alert! Red alert! It's the mid-video credits. Works like this are only made possible by the generous support of viewers over on Patreon and here as YouTube members. If you would like to support the channel, as well as gain access to exclusive perks like merch, early access to videos, and voting in polls, consider supporting the channel by following the link in the description below.
If he talks about me in there, so.
Oh, you play fucking Roy?
No, he doesn't.
Wasn't then. Yeah, no, I was pretty like positive it wasn't gonna be like great, but like I didn't realize it was gonna be like fucking bad. It wasn't pathetic. Much. It was extremely pathetic. I remember I opened the box and I laughed to myself because I was like, "Holy shit, this is it!"
You call me a sellout all you want, but I will not give Mr. Beast money.
That sounds good as fuck.
Yeah, no, it was awesome.
I'm better.
Oh, yo.
I had a great time.
Alright, I just wanted to win. I'm happy. Fuck off,
I
Tag.
wanted the win. Bro, I'm just saying, I had
win.
more stocks
Dude,
than you.
What do you guys think
Dude.
of Roy?
I think he's
Right?
right. I play him.
He's a terrible fucking character.
He's our boy.
He is my favorite character to play.
I fucking hate him, but not because of Smash.
I
Because of this
once-
game.
I forgot
I
that
once
Roy
played
existed.
Xavier
The
Sheik
game, you
against
say?
my Roy.
Yeah, the fucking. Oh no, wait! I just realized. Is this a fucking bit for?
Fire Emblem: The Binding Blade. It was the series' first handheld title and laid the foundation for the next 2 Fire Emblem titles. It was also the first entry to be without series director Shozo Kaga at the helm since the original NES release. The Binding Blade is one of several Fire Emblem titles that the West never received. Of course, even though there was never an official release, there are ways to play it in English. Now, I personally am not advocating that those interested in playing The Binding Blade do so through dubious means. After all, I'm a guest here, and Bopper doesn't make enough in Super Chats to beat Nintendo in court. I'm merely saying that those who want to play The Binding Blade in English certainly can if they know where to look. I actually played through The Binding Blade for the first time near the beginning of this year. I was hankering for some Fire Emblem and was curious about the one GBA title that never made it stateside. 30 or so hours later, I completed it, best ending and everything. Now, the viewer ranking for Binding Blade puts it a little under the middle in the power rankings. I'll be honest, I haven't played a large amount of the games on this list, and while I think the ranking it received may be a little harsh, I can see why it would land there. If I had to describe The Binding Blade in one statement, it'd be this. It is the skeleton of a great game. Binding Blade is the first in a new direction for the series, and it shows in many places. For one, the story is incredibly simple. It can be boiled down to the main character Roy going across the land to bolster forces against a warring nation. It has a few twists that I won't spoil since it's pretty much all the game has. The story is bare bones, and that wouldn't be a problem if The Binding Blade wasn't a 30-hour game. In my opinion, a few big reveals at the end of the game don't make up for the majority of the plot being, Roy went here and asked for some help in the army, and then he got it. Not to mention that the true finale of the story is locked behind some frankly ludicrous requirements. Certain chapters require specific clear requirements, and when these requirements are fulfilled, you gain access to extra guidance chapters that give you something called a legendary weapon. There are 6 of these chapters, with all of them rewarding the player with some sort of powerful weapon upon completion. The problem is, unless you looked it up ahead of time, you wouldn't really have any idea how to access the guidance chapter. Usually there's a character that'll tell you a legendary weapon is nearby, but it's easy to miss. In addition, if you do mess up, and know it, restarting the chapter can end up being a big ask if it's late into the game, where some chapters take up to an hour to complete. If that wasn't bad enough, these legendary weapons must remain in your inventory until a certain chapter is completed, otherwise the additional and pretty boring guidance chapters would have been done for no reason. If I had to find one fatal flaw with the Binding Blade, it'd be this. If you want to get the most out of the game, you need to go through these extra chapters, which makes everything far too long in the tooth. Although, if I'm being honest, every time I've played a Fire Emblem, I always feel like the games would have been better if they ended 3 chapters earlier than they did. So the Binding Blade isn't unique with this flaw, but it's definitely the worst I've seen, since a lot of the chapters aren't very exciting to play. This game has a reputation for poor map design, and it lives up to that reputation fairly often. What with the same turn ambush spawns, maps consisting of one long choke point, Sakai, and of course, chapter bosses that have stats massively inflated due to the chair they sit on. This game is annoying, a lot of the time. And yet, GBA Fire Emblem got its start with the Binding Blade, and while it doesn't have the refinements of the later entries, the chassis, everything holding this very flawed game together is almost polished to a blinding sheen. Character portraits drop the aggressively 90s aesthetic for a more timeless look. I don't think these portraits have aged a day. Gameplay has been streamlined significantly, mostly for the best. There's still some aspects that need to be worked out, like rescue dropping, less than generous hit rates, and most of all, supports. Although unfortunately that last one never really got the attention it deserved in any of the 3 GBA entries. Regardless, this is an excellent first try in shaking up the formula, and would pave the way for some of the most beloved entries in the series. Best of all, though, has to be the animations. Is it trite to still be gushing over these animations after all these years? If it is, I don't care. I'll never get tired of how flashy and snappy all the animations in this game are. I could watch that thief animation all day. When looking at the big picture, Binding Blade can be frustrating, drawn out by the numbers, but moment to moment, Rutger just landed a crit, I'm popping off. Mike Monkey of RPG Gamer said in his review of Binding Blade that it was neither the best in the Fire Emblem series, nor was it the worst. And I happen to agree, as does the fanbase it seems. It hasn't slipped past me that the tepid, not amazing, but not terrible probably won't inspire many people to seek this game out and play it. So that's why I much prefer the skeleton of a great game idiom I used earlier. There's plenty to outright love about the Binding Blade, but it's far from perfect. Hell, I didn't even get into how weak of a unit the main character is. We'd probably be here another 5 minutes if we did though, so I'll spare everyone the tired spiel. The Binding Blade fares better as a reminder of what the series would become rather than as a standalone game. The final time the Fire Emblem name would only be known in the East. Despite its middling premise, it's far from a footnote in the series.
Hello humans, LinkKing7 here to grace you with only the hottest of takes. By now you know the drill. My comrades and I are here to tell you how wrong your ratings of Fire Emblem games are, and how vastly superior our opinions are. At least, those are the instructions I got from Bopper, so you can blame him for the content of this review. Anyways, when I initially got the sign-up sheet to pick which games I wanted to rate, there was one specific game that I instantly put my eyes on. Anyone who knows me is probably thinking, it's FE4. And you're right. I lied. There were two games I wanted to talk about, but no one would guess that one of them is actually Shadow Dragon. You, the public, the most vulnerable viewers, the furiously fascinating Fire Emblem fans, and unfortunately, unapologetically, and unanimously unique individuals voted this game to have a rating of 6.36. I'm gonna be harsh, and sorry Shadow Dragon fans, but you guys gotta suck it up. But this is a 3 out of 10 game. The story sucks, the animations suck, the characters suck, the sprites are pretty ugly, and the art is not great either. The music is decent, but Fire Emblem generally has consistently good music, so that's not really saying much. But the gameplay, however, is actually one of the okay parts of this game. Unfortunately, the maps are stretched out and long without good reason, but what do you expect? It's a remake of the very first love child of Kaga and masochism. It's going to have its flaws. But what I can't forgive is how mediocre of a remake it is. It doesn't really do anything to enhance the experience other than speed up the slow pace the gameplay had in the original, and give everything a new coat of paint. As a matter of fact, I'd go as far as to say there's only one good thing about Shadow Dragon: the PvP. Yes, you heard me right. Fire Emblem PvP. Look, the PvP here is simple. You and your opponent start on the opposite sides of the map in a fog of war scenario, and there's a central castle in the middle of the map that you can capture. If you capture it for enough turns, or eliminate your opponent, you win. Simple enough, right? This central objective forces you to move inwards and clash with your opponent, and also prevents turtling. They also have time limits per turn, as well as a total turn limit per battle, so you can't really stall out your opponent forever. And if that wasn't enough, it added in a little element of personal touch called cards. Cards were unique effects that you could select pre-battle. Each person gets one card, and that effect is activated during the battle. Some of them are as simple as doing 20% damage to all enemies at the start, others reduced fog of war vision of the opposing team, while some just give flat stat boosts to your units or healed some HP every turn. There are a lot of combinations, and alongside the class customizability of Shadow Dragon itself, it made it interesting and kept players on their toes as to what their opponent was going to use. Sadly, I don't think there's a living community for this, but this is legit the only reason I'd ever play Shadow Dragon again. The replayability value of this game lies purely in customizing and reclassing different units to come up with unique team combinations to wreak havoc on the PvP scene. So yeah, I wouldn't give this game more than a solid 3. One of those points goes to the actual gameplay, and the other 2 go to online. Everything else gets a big fat 0, and I'll see y'all haters in the comments. Peace!
Hey, Nin here, actually talking. First off, I enjoyed my time with New Mystery. Now that that is out of the way, a lot of not so good things about Shadow Dragon also appear in this game. I can confirm a lot of things that Link just said in his review. Wait, fire? What, why? No PvP, no. Okay, good. Okay. Then again, I think this one is better than Shadow Dragon and has a lot better game feel than other games due to the simplified game mechanics and general quality of life. That doesn't mean it is better in general than other games though. There are a lot of better games that can be considered more tedious. To me, New Mystery feels like decent and easy to consume processed food. In some cases, it might just be the perfect thing you need. And it was just what I needed to feel better about Fire Emblem again after playing DD. Whoops, I shouldn't mention that. I mean, the Death Drive from Travis Strikes Again, yes, of course, what a good game console. Anyway, the characters are a big part of Fire Emblem, and bringing back support conversations is a big upgrade. They are even better if you had characters you liked in Shadow Dragon because you can finally see what they might have to say. And the independent side story maps were something I actually enjoyed. Also, this is the first time I've seen bad hit rates actually fitting into the gameplay. At least a bit. They provide a little more story about characters that might be neglected, like Bord and Cord. Oh, wait. Maybe not all of them. And, admittedly, not all characters were done that well in general.
The characters suck.
But it was refreshing to play without Marth, and even characters like Kleine become likable. Well, maybe if you really hate Marth, that is. Wait, what? She's called Clarice in Heroes? Why? They used like 20 German names in 776. They renamed Stella to Astrid in English, which could be a German name. Wait, she's still called Stella in German? What even? What's this? Did she just break the fourth wall, telling me how horrendous and unfair Fog of War is? And in a Fire Emblem game? I think I might have a new favorite character. Oh, maybe not. New Mystery also introduced a surprising amount of new features that would be kept in Awakening. Having stupid difficulty settings like Lunatic Reverse, for example. That said, I usually tend to like harder games. But I knew that New Mystery can be very tedious and annoying for a just for fun playthrough. So I decided to get the processed food and just play on normal. Surprisingly, I had a lot of fun. Not really because the game design was immaculate, but because it leaves you a lot of freedom. If you can restrain yourself from stomping everything with the avatar, like in an usual Awakening run, you can make your own fun with the game. Since I was pretty much guaranteed to get through the game, I decided to actually use every single character, at least for a few chapters. It was fun reclassing characters, or just trying out someone like, what's his name, Frost? And one of the best things was that it made a bad level up not feel bad in the slightest. It felt very different to what I'm used to from Fire Emblem games and what was probably intended. But I think that I would think much less of this game if I had played it in that way. That means... Oh no, the time for this part is over! Waiting. I'm with Link here. Oh no, Fire again! And I have to say it is better than Shadow Dragon, but still pretty meh. I wouldn't recommend it, unless you want a different Fire Emblem experience and a relaxing time. Well, and you need to be able to restrain yourself. For example, like eating nothing for a week without a problem. Then you might have a good time. Oh, my instant noodles are done. Professor, I will hand the outro to you.
And that concludes the first 12 games in the series. If you disagree with this list or anything said by myself and others, then go to the comment section and have a big fight. And how would you all personally rank each of these 12 games? See you next time for part 2, when we will go over the top 10.